One of the greatest Gothic fiction writers of all time has got to be Edgar Allan Poe. Many of you may have heard of him if you are in high school or even college, as he is usually taught in classes about either Gothic literature or just American literature in general, as he is considered one of the greatest Gothic American literature writers of the 19th century. Now, if you're as big of a fan as Edgar Allan Poe as I am, then you will appreciate this book review because this is an author that I really enjoyed getting into when I was in high school about, I think, sophomore year. The Complete Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe is an amazing collection of nearly every single piece of work that Edgar Allan Poe had ever written in his lifetime. Edgar Allan Poe, in my mind, is one of the most underrated literary geniuses of his time. There were a lot of things in his past that were really exemplified in his writing as he became a well-known author, short stories and poetry alike. There was a lot of pain and a lot of anger that was brought up in his stories, and he brings up a lot about love and loss and death and things that just seemed kind of out of the ordinary for many writers in the 19th century. However, it was because he was able to push those boundaries that he was able to become one of the most well-known authors of his time period and still one of the most well-known authors of future generations. I first heard of Edgar Allan Poe when I was in the 10th grade in an English class. We read his short stories, The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart, and from there, I don't know what exactly it was, but I fell in love with Edgar's writing. His writing was so captivating, and it looked older because it was from an older time period. And just the way that he was able to create these very dark and gory images in my mind was just inspiring because it made me want to try to write more in the way he did. And then when I got into college, I read for the first time The Cask of Amontillado in a literature analysis class. And that, by far, is my favorite Edgar Allan Poe piece because of the message that it sends about revenge and this aspect of revenge and how it is able to corrupt the mind in a way that is almost unfathomable. How revenge can overtake the mind so easily that it leaves you blind to everything that you are doing at that current moment that you are struck by that revenge aspect. And it was the most amazing thing I had ever read in my entire life. It is one of the reasons why I have found Edgar Allan Poe's writing to be absolutely amazing. Every collection of an author's work is done a little differently. Sometimes they'll go in chronological order. Typically, this is the way to go because it shows the actual from the beginning of the person's writing in this certain genre to up to before they pass away. Sometimes, though, they may do a certain theme where they pick certain poems and they keep them in sections so that they all pertain to a particular theme for that section. However, this was split up into not just tales and poems, but it was also given chronologically. So the section of poems started from the very beginning, all of the poems he wrote from the first poem he wrote and published to the one that was published before his death, along with the same for the short stories and the novels that he wrote in his lifetime. There were some poems and stories that were not put in this collection, and I'm not sure exactly as to why. Perhaps it is because they were never actually published stories, or they were actually stories that were found later on in maybe a bureau or a drawer of some kind of Edgar Allan Poe's that they had found after his passing and were published posthumously or after his death. I'm not exactly sure as to why. And then for the tales portion, for the short story portion, a lot of the stories were kind of jumbled around. They weren't exactly in chronological order from what I had researched. However, I think that they were along the same year, that they weren't sure exactly as to where to put them in terms of like if one came before the other earlier in the year or it didn't. I don't know if they exactly knew off the top of their heads when it came, but they were all at least within the same year that they were put in the same area. So that at least was really nice to see that they all tried to combine them into the same year. Honestly, there's not much I can say about this because it's just a collection of a former author's work and all the things that he wrote. I guess the best thing I can say about it is I thought the structure was really nice. I mean, they didn't just put random poems together. They didn't just put random stories together. They actually took the time to structure the book into separate sections of the poems and the stories and trying to keep them in a chronological order so that you can see from the beginning to the end how his writing progressed and how his different poems kind of progressed as well, especially ones that were either related or ones that were unrelated, how they differed from each other. I don't know, I just thought it was a really interesting thing, and Edgar Allan Poe, like I said, is one of my favorite authors of all time, one of my favorite short story authors for sure, because of his ability to become so dark and twisted and just give such gory detail about the most simplest of things, and it's just so inspiring as a writer myself to read from this. So if you're a fan of very, very good literature, definitely pick up Edgar Allan Poe's work, because he is honestly one of the most amazing American authors I've ever read. And I wish that, I was able to be exposed to him much earlier in my life than I was. But I'm fortunate to have been able to be exposed to him at all. But that's all I got for you guys today for this book review. I know the last two have been kind of weird because it's been more of like, they're not necessarily books per se, they're more of collections of stories, but I thought they were still pretty interesting to talk about because, I don't know, the last one, Ghostly, had a lot of stories that I don't think I hadn't heard of before that I was really interested in reading, and I felt like it would expose a lot of readers to older authors, a lot of older authors that are not really taught anymore. And then this one is on an author who I've loved since I was since a young teenager, and have still fawned over for the last, I don't know, going on probably 7 years of my life. I don't know exactly, but yeah, I just thought it was a really cool idea to incorporate Poe's work into my book reviews because he is one of my favorite authors of all time. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining me in this book review of the Complete Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. If you guys enjoyed it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys!